All right, we're going to start then. Welcome everybody to Research in Africa, a webinar that has been organized by ISBNPA, which stands for International Society of Behavior, Nutrition and Physical Activity, if you don't know it, and NCDAK, which is a Non-Communicable Disease Alliance of Kenya. The purpose of this seminar today is to first showcase research in behavioral nutrition and physical activity in Africa, which is really underrepresented in our journals and different type of outlets. So we would like to know what's actually happening in the continent. And the second purpose of the webinar is to explore how our society, ISBNPA, can help researchers in Africa to promote and develop their research in the field of physical activity and nutrition. So my name is Ester Cerin. I'm a professor in physical activity and health at the Australian Catholic University in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm the president of the society. Therefore, I'm here to talk about first what ISBNPA is doing, what the main goals of our society are, and what our activities and what type of activities we actually have developed to progress our field. And Antonio, you can actually start the presentation now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it on?
Yes, that's fine. So let's start with what is ISBNPA?
Oops.
Can you see? Right? Yeah. Okay. We're jumping. So ISBNPA is a group of very enthusiastic people that are really ready to, to entertain challenges, even if sometimes they may not look that good when they actually pick up those challenges. Our mission is to, as you see here, we're very enthusiastic. We want action. We want to do something about our society, but we don't look good sometimes. But we don't really care about it as long as we can actually promote the field. Our mission is to stimulate, promote research that has an impact on society. And it's all about behavioral nutrition and physical activity. We're not only interested in human health and well-being, we're also interested in promoting planetary health and well-being because we know that they're interconnected. Next. It's a bit slow. So our society is about understanding the behaviors of physical activity and nutrition and figure out how different factors, contextual, individual, biological, and psychosocial factors shape these activities that are important for health. When we talk about physical activity, we don't only focus on what we consider to be movement. We also focus on sedentary behavior, which is on the spectrum of mobility behaviors, and sleep. So we included these two additional behaviors in our research because we consider them as being very important. We focus on physical activity, but also nutrition. Do you know any other society that actually studies both types of behavior? I actually Googled it. I tried to find a society that does that and couldn't find it. The only one I picked up on Google was ISBNPA. So the only one doing this. And ISBNPA was created 20 years ago. I don't think I was a member of ISBNPA when it was created. I joined it a bit later. But it consists of three main components. And it's an annual meeting. So our society manifests itself in its best light at the annual meetings, which are in person, except for the years when we had the COVID pandemic, obviously. We have a journal of the society, an International Journal of Behavior, Nutrition, Physical Activity, which is really highly rated in the field. And we have special interest groups that cover different topics in the field. So these are the main activities we do. in order to support and guide and direct these activities, we have a strategic plan, which consists of 4 components or 4 pillars. You can, change the slide. And these 4 pillars are climate action, impact, inclusive culture, and growing the next generation, because they provide what? An impactful, sustainable, inclusive, and future-focused society. As I mentioned before, our mission is not about improving human health. It's also about improving and maintaining planetary health. So we have a pillar that focuses on climate action. So this initiative aims to measure all our activities that impact on the climate. Like, for example, we measure our carbon footprint and how our activities, our conference, produces impacts on carbon footprint, and we try to minimize it as much as possible. The second pillar is impact. We're trying to devise ways of measuring the impact that our research has on society and improving the way it impacts society. The third pillar is having an inclusive culture, and this webinar is actually part of that activity. What we want to do is to foster, nurture, and sustain an inclusive culture, so everybody has the opportunity to develop to their full potential in the field, irrespective of where they are, their background, and their experiences. Then the next pillar, the fourth one, is growing the new generation, because without a new generation, we don't have a society. And so for us as a society, it's really important to nurture future researchers from their PhD years to the early career in the field. And how do we do that? Well, we have different programs. Like, for example, we have a pioneer program. We're going to hear something about that aims to support research in low to middle income countries. And we provide a tiny bit of pot of money for people to do so. It's a competitive program. So we actually select the best research that's submitted to us. The Building Future Leaders is another initiative of ours that's within Growing the Next Generation. And what we're trying to do here is to grow leaders, to support the development of leaders in the field from a non-scientific point of view. So they become advocates for society, and they know how to communicate and be persuasive in their communication. And they know also how to network and manage other people in the field. So, and we have obviously ISBNPA webinars, and this is one of them, where we try to communicate, not only what a society does, but also research a specific field. And it's usually connected to our SIG programs, which are special interest groups. So that's who we are. I've just given you a very small snapshot of what we do. And now it's actually time to hear what type of research is being conducted in Africa. We have 2 presenters, and they will be introduced by Adewale Oyeyemi. Adewale is an associate professor at Arizona State University. He's a colleague of mine. We've been working together since, I don't know, it's probably more than 10 years on research and the built environment of physical activity. Adewale?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ester Cerin, and good morning, Africa. Before I do the introduction of the 2 presenters, I will just quickly tell you about the housekeeping for today's webinar. We want to make this webinar as interactive as possible, and we will require you to possibly type in your questions and comment in the Q&A section. You may not likely be able to speak with us directly, but we are recording the webinar, and we'll be able to share it at the end of the program. So we have 2 presenters today. Both of them will be presenting for about 15 minutes each. And at the end of the presentation, we have about 25 to 30 minutes of discussion session So the first presenter is Dr. Catherine.Karekezi, who is the Executive Director of NCD Alliance Kenya. NCD Alliance Kenya is a non-governmental organization that seeks to address the rising prevalence of non-communicable diseases in Kenya by bringing together all players working in different aspects of NCD control. So, Dr. Catherine Karekezi, I give you the floor to proceed. Thank you.
Oh gosh, what have I done? Yeah, to share my screen. Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. And thank you for the welcome to the webinar and for inviting NCD Alliance to be part of this webinar series. So I'll just share my screen. Oh dear. Apologies, let me just find the presentation again. So good morning, everyone. You can see my screen? Yeah, apologies for that.
Yes.
So basically what I'd like to discuss this morning, just to mention that November is Diabetes Month, and yesterday we were commemorating World Diabetes Day. So this morning I'd just like to talk about some aspects of type 2 diabetes and nutrition. So it's not going to be specifically on research that we have conducted, but just some aspects of diabetes and nutrition. I know the NCD Alliance has already been introduced. Yes, we are a membership organization with 50 members cutting across different aspects, professional associations, patient-led organizations, as well as local and international organizations. We have a vision of NCD-free Kenya, and we strive to be the lead organization on NCDs across the continuum of care. Our main areas of work are advocacy, meaningful involvement of persons living with NCDs, research and knowledge management, and of course, institutional growth and development. Just by way of introduction, I'm sure you're all aware about the non-communicable diseases, and this is just a 5x5 template. Cardiovascular disease, chronic respiratory diseases, cancer, diabetes, mental and neurological conditions, and then the risk factors, which include unhealthy diets, tobacco use, harmful use of alcohol, as well as physical inactivity and air pollution. So that's just by way of introduction to the non-communicable diseases and their risk factors. And we see unhealthy diets is a major risk factor for NCDs. Moving on to just aspects of NCDs in Africa and globally. Specifically, when we consider Africa, there's been a rapid population growth, which has also led to urbanization. And this has resulted in lifestyle changes of reduced physical activity and increased consumption of unhealthy foods. There are also socioeconomic disparities, many affecting people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, which often limits their access to nutritious food as well as healthcare services, and therefore increases their susceptibility to diabetes and related non-communicable diseases. As we know, in Africa, there's also the coexistence of infectious diseases and non-communicable diseases. So for example, tuberculosis and HIV/AIDS. And in addition to the fact that there are limited resources and access to healthcare, especially in rural areas. So essentially now we are finding the double burden of, for example, TB, diabetes, HIV, and hypertension and diabetes. And for many HIV patients, they're actually succumbing to either diabetes-related complications or complications related to hypertension. We're also aware that there is a nutrition transition from traditional African traditional diets to high energy dense, nutrient deficient, so-called Western diets. And this is something which is known to be fueling the increase in burden of NCDs on the continent. Moving on to Kenya, Just to give you a snapshot of the burden of NCDs in Kenya, NCDs account for about 41% of the deaths. Over 50% of hospital admissions are due to non-communicable diseases, and more than 55% of the hospital deaths can actually be attributed to non-communicable diseases. Essentially, the main NCDs in Kenya are cardiovascular diseases, cancer, chronic respiratory diseases, with diabetes accounting for about 6% of the mortality in the country. Essentially, diabetes is a global concern, and diabetes is a metabolic condition which is associated with morbidity and high mortality. In Africa, the International Diabetes Federation estimates that 1 in 22 adults have diabetes. That's about 24 million individuals. The total number of people with diabetes in Africa is predicted to increase by 129% to 55 million by 2045. And this is actually going to be the biggest increase globally. More than 1 in 2 people, about 54% of the people living with diabetes on the African continent, are actually undiagnosed. And in 2021, diabetes was responsible for 416,000 deaths on the continent. In Kenya, as I've said, diabetes contributes about 6% of the NCD mortality, but more importantly, 45% of persons with diabetes, 44% of adults are unaware, only 44% of adults are aware of their diabetes status. Only 20% of those who have been diagnosed with diabetes are receiving treatment, and only 7% of those receiving treatment are under control. So you can see there's a big disparity in terms of the numbers of persons living with diabetes, those who are able to access care, and those who are actually under control. But more importantly, the majority of adults in the country are not aware of their diabetes status. And just to mention the fact that diabetes does not have overt symptoms initially, and one is likely to have overt symptoms once one has been living with diabetes for several years. In our country, most people tend to be diagnosed with diabetes when they're having already eye complications, maybe wounds which are not healing, or else going into renal complications. So moving on to other aspects of diabetes. Sorry, I just need to go up a bit. Diabetes is known to be associated with inflammation, and this is specifically type 2 diabetes. There are 3 major types of diabetes. There's type 1 diabetes, which primarily occurs in children, adolescents, and this is not preventable. It is associated with either inflammatory or other processes in the body. Then we have type 2 diabetes, which is a major type of diabetes, the most prevalent type of diabetes globally and also in our country. And then we also have gestational diabetes, which is first diagnosed during pregnancy and often resolves after the pregnancy. But talking specifically about type 2 diabetes, this is actually a preventable condition in most cases, and one can either prevent or delay the onset of diabetes. This has been shown to be an inflammatory process, which has been shown to be associated with certain inflammatory markers. And diabetes is basically associated with a defective insulin secretion or insulin resistance. Just to mention that insulin is a hormone which is responsible for the uptake of glucose into the body cells, where the glucose provides energy. So by having defective insulin secretion or insulin resistance, it means that one ends up with elevated blood glucose concentrations, and this is thought to trigger immune responses. Specific inflammatory markers, which are associated with type 2 diabetes, include the lymphocytes, the B and the T cells. We also have the monocytes and macrophages and reactive oxygen species. You may wonder why I'm talking about all of this, but moving on to traditional African diets. These are generally characterized by high complex carbohydrates. They tend to be low in protein and fat. Considering the leafy African vegetables, the traditional vegetables, which were the mainstay of nutrition in the past, these contain certain chemicals like flavonoids, carotenoids. They're also good source of minerals, for example, potassium, magnesium, and other vitamins. They're also high in crude fiber. The micronutrients are obviously going to be required for basic general metabolic processes in the system. So essentially, these traditional vegetables have because of their contents, the flavonoids, the carotenoids, the minerals, and other chemical constituents, they have anti-inflammatory, anti-diabetic, basically anti-hyperglycemic properties. They also have been shown to have anti-cancer properties, anti-cholesterolemia, and also basically antioxidant properties. And these are the kind of properties that we would require to manage and control, for example, type 2 diabetes and some other inflammatory conditions in the system. So basically, as I've mentioned, these specific components which are high in these traditional African countries, vegetables, which tend to grow wild in our countries, these are the natural nutrients or natural components which are essential in preventing and also controlling type 2 diabetes. We also know that in Africa, we have additional benefits of African diets. The cereals tend to be high in fiber, and this is important for lowering glucose levels. We also have traditional African fruits, for example, the prickly pear, which contain hypoglycemic agents. The roots and the tubers, for example, cassava, sweet potatoes, contain antioxidant and anti-inflammatory agents. In addition to the legumes, the beans, and the peas that are very common in different African countries, these tend to have antioxidant agents. Another type of food that is commonly used or traditionally used in African countries were fermented foods. And these are high in antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-diabetic, and they also do have anti-atherosclerotic activity, and that would be very helpful for cardiovascular conditions. We are well aware that in today's world, there has been the transition from traditional African diets, which are high in these traditional vegetables and the other legumes, cereals, fruits, and tubers, to the more so-called Western diet, which is high in fats, refined sugars, salts, and generally, these are the agents which are really fueling the NCD epidemic in Africa, in our country. And of course, I would say that there is globalization and the transition from traditional lifestyles to more Western sedentary lifestyles. We are all acknowledge the influence of motorized transport in our countries. Now we have motorbikes, which are available almost everywhere. So basically, in terms of active transport, this has really reduced. So people are no longer walking as much as they should. So basically, I would say that in conclusion, we do need to maintain and to restore the African traditional diets, essentially for prevention and control of type 2 diabetes and related non-communicable diseases. Basically, just to finalize, I'd just like to, don't know if I have a little time, just to talk about the NCD Alliance of Kenya and the type of work that we do. I know I did introduce at the beginning that we are a membership organization and with about 50 members. We also work, Kenya has different counties. We work with the Ministry of Health, specifically with the NCD Interagency Coordinating Committee. And this is a committee which brings on board the non-health sector to understand their role in NCD prevention and control. So we work with education, environment, agriculture, trade and industry, and so on. We're also replicating that at the county level, where we have our county chapters, basically comprised of people living with NCDs and other organizations to conduct community awareness. We do have a national caucus. This is an organization led by persons with lived experience, and these are our main advocacy groups. We also have a media network, and we're able, therefore, to create awareness of NCDs and advocacy for NCDs beyond our membership. And we're also part of the Global NCD Alliance movement and the Africa NCD Alliances. So thank you very much for your attention. I would be happy to take any questions at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Karekezi, for the great talk. Again, and before I move to the next presenter, I would like to encourage all the members of the audience to drop in their question and comment in the Q&A box. So our next speaker is a well-known professor in the physical activities and behavioral nutrition field in Africa. He's Professor Vincent Onywera. Is the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation and Outreach, and is also a Professor of Exercise and Sport Science at the KCA University, Nairobi, Kenya. I will allow Professor Onywera to do the talking. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adewale. Thank you very much, colleagues, Ester, Cerin, Antonio Palmera, and Catherine. Thank you to the members of the audience. I send you warm greetings from Nairobi, Kenya. I send you greetings from the entire African continent. I'm very pleased to see the entire world here attending this webinar. So my talk is going to revolve around the physical activity and nutrition transition and a call to strategy and action. I have arranged my presentation around 4 thematic areas or 5. We look at physical activity, what are the benefits, there are some appearances and disappearances in Africa, and I'll share with you some ongoing initiatives. So this is KCA University, which is located in Nairobi, Kenya. And on behalf of our university, I welcome all of you to KCA University. The university has the Vice Chancellor and CEO who is a champion of healthy, active living. We normally have an annual cycling event led by our Vice Chancellor and CEO, Professor Isaiah I.C. Wakindiki, and supported by the entire university community. Just this year, we were able to do 1,002 kilometers of cycling. This is the biggest university-led cycling event in the world. We would like to patent it. We'll have it run across the African continent in the coming years. So physical activity is not new to a number of us, but it is important that we keep talking about it, or lest we lose the vision. So physical activity is any bodily movement caused by skeletal muscles that results in the expenditure of energy. It is the motherboard. Within physical activity, we have sports, we have games, we have play, we have exercise, and many, many other forms. We have physical education. So when we talk about physical activity, we should know that it's the motherboard and it is the backbone upon which all forms of movement are anchored. Physical activity, again, this is not new to a number of us, has several benefits, ranging from enhanced mood, reduced depression, enhanced cardiovascular health, enhanced quality of living, ability to address some forms of cancers, enhanced independent living, enhanced peace, development, education, achievements, fun, and development, and contributing to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I've just mentioned that if you look at the 17 goals, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, physical activity is almost at the center of each and every one of these goals, especially the goal on good health and well-being, quality education, gender equity and equality, life on land, climate action, peace, justice, and strong institutions, communities, partnership goal for implementation. Therefore, it is very important that we keep the eye on the ball. We promote physical activities at home, in the communities, in the schools, in the universities, and in the cities where we live. Agenda 2063, the Africa Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, puts physical activity and sports right at the center. In fact, it talks about getting Africa on the move, getting Africa active. We, therefore, have a cardinal responsibility to step forward and contribute towards Agenda 2063. But what is the problem? Why is Africa restless? We are restless because we are facing an obesogenic environment. And this environment is rapidly sweeping across the African continent. An environment that encourages the overconsumption of energy-dense food and engaging in insufficient amounts of physical activity. This environment, this threat calls for our action. We have seen, and Dr. Karekezi has already explained this, that the increase in non-communicable diseases in a continent that is also straddled by communicable diseases and health systems that are not very strong, we are seeing a strain, we are seeing a huge burden of non-communicable diseases, chronic diseases, caused by, among others, unhealthy diet, physical inactivity, and alcohol abuse, as well as tobacco. Africa cannot sit. Africa must stand up. Africa must be on the track so that we can save the planet, we can save the continent and the future generations. We are seeing an emerging evidence of sedentary lifestyle. And this evidence, this research that we have done, we are seeing that. We are seeing physical activity, this evidence that physical inactivity is leading in mortality. And it is more serious in the low-income countries. We are seeing screen invasion, children in school, adults, youth are now glued on screens, one form of screen or another. This is making us less active. It is reducing time for our physical activity, active transportation. yes, while development and screen enhances our way of doing business, we must not drop the ball to encourage us, to encourage the young generation, to encourage our communities to be active. Studies have shown that children in urban areas, in fact, spend more time on the screen as opposed to those in the rural areas. But today, this is a study that we did more than 10 years ago. Today, a similar study will give us almost different results, because even in the rural areas, we have seen an influx of screen. We are seeing children on the screen. Gone are the days when we would walk for 2 or 3 hours to go and use a telephone booth. You see what's on the extreme left, because everything has been mechanized. We are seeing an increase in obesity among young people. Unfortunately, there are cultural beliefs where obesity is seen as good health, good life, and a source of wealth. So we have to engage in advocacy to ensure that we save our planet and save our future. We are seeing a growing cases of obesity in the Eastern Africa region. And this, not only Eastern Africa region, this is the scenario in the African continent. We must save our children. We will get harsh judgment if we don't stand up with all the evidence that we have to save the African continent. There's a reduction in active transportation. And again, you see that in the urban areas, a lot more children prefer to use either a bus or use a car than walk or run. We have to look at the factors that are leading to this. Is it insecurity? Is it the built environment? Is it familial influence? Is it peer influence? All these have to be addressed. We cannot address them alone. We need an intersectoral approach to be able to address these challenges. The Kenyan running phenomenon, and we are very proud of the Kenyan runners, the best of the best in middle and long distance running. We are seeing that the time that they used to spend those years, several years back, to move from one space to another is now reducing. They used to run, they used to walk. Today, we are seeing that they are using some form of motorized transport. We have to address this. So, we have to take the initiatives. We cannot sit. We must step forward. And that's why I'm very happy with this first webinar series supported by ISBNPA and working with the Non-Communicable Disease Alliance of Kenya. We will be having several webinar series hosted by different institutions in Africa, from West Africa to Eastern Africa to Central Africa and to Southern Africa. We know the science. We have the evidence. What do we need to do? We have to get out to action. We must get out of the boardrooms. The time for talking and lamentation is over, because we don't know everything, but we know enough to act. With that in mind, here in Nairobi, here at KCA University, with our leadership, we have started what we call the Children and Youth Physical Activity and Sports for Health and Development in Africa. This is the map that we have started with. And the overarching goal of this program is to use physical activity agenda to promote the health and well-being of children and youth in Africa. The objectives, I know my time is up, but I'll run through this quickly. We want to build the capacity of the PE and sports teachers to be able to advance physical activity and health in our schools in Africa. We want to promote climate action, plenary act through sports and physical activity. We want to promote research, science, technology in physical education, sports in Africa. We want to promote cultures, build skills, shape childhoods through traditional and indigenous games in Africa. we are losing our traditional games. But through this program, we want to ensure that we activate, sustain the traditional games of Africa. We would like to create sustainable, child-friendly green spaces in schools and communities. We want to foster unity among all children by promoting inclusive sports and sound policies and systems in African schools. We want to introduce and adopt a school program. Every organization, every institution, can they adopt one school? Adopt by promoting the built environment for children and youth to be active. At KCA University, we have this program. We started it in 2003. I'm very happy about the outcome, about the impact of this program. We started with about 10 kids, but today the numbers have overgrown. We have close to 100 kids who come to KCA University every school holiday. Like now, I have close to 150 kids in the field here. I'll be joining them shortly after this webinar. Those children, they are coming from the informal sectors. Can all our universities, can all our schools around Africa open up the fields so that these children can come to the field, they can come and play, they can come and grow, they can come and interact. I don't have the resources. I don't know everything, but I know enough to act. At KCA University here, these children are there right now, and I'll be joining them shortly. We were targeting 8 to 12-year-olds, but I got shocked that even 4-year-olds said they want to come to KCA grounds to play, to grow. And we are very, very happy with this legacy. I want to invite ISBNPA and other partners across the world to support us in making this legacy sustainable at KCA University as it grows to the rest of Africa. In conclusion, we are seeing a decline in physical activity levels among children and youth in Africa. This need for more education and awareness and advocacy. We need to do studies, multi-country studies in this area. We need to support every child in making choices that are convenient, attractive, and compatible with their needs, abilities, and interests. This need for continuous monitoring and surveillance of physical activity patterns in Kenya and indeed in Africa. Let us consolidate our efforts. Let us pool our resources. Let us scale up. Let us engage partners outside of physical activity and nutrition. Thank you very much, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Onywera, for the insightful presentation. So before we open up the floor for question and answer and discussion, I will quickly want to say that both speakers have talked eloquently about the situation of NCDs and also the state of physical activities and behavioral nutrition in Africa. They've used Kenya as a context for doing that, but most of what they've spoken about applies virtually throughout the sub-Saharan Africa. And I think the issue now is how to elevate the talk to more actionable point and how society like the International Society for Behavioral Nutrition and Physical Activities can help to also address some of the issues that have been raised. So one of the things I will want both speakers to talk a little bit more about is the fact that we know that the state of policy, the state of research, and also the state of surveillance on physical activity and behavioral nutrition in Africa is always low compared to those in other part of the world. So what are the things that what are the actions that you think are needed to improve surveillance policy and also research on lifestyle behaviors. We know that lifestyle behaviors are mostly work drives and explain most of the NCDs that are occurring in Africa. So what are the actions that you think we can leverage upon to improve policy, research, and surveillance on physical activity and behavioral nutrition in Africa? So it's an open discussion. And Dr. Onywera, you want to say
Thank
something?
you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Adewale. I've seen your questions. What do we need to do? One, we need to engage outside physical activity, outside nutrition. There are many other players. The ministry, for example, in Africa, in Kenya, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of Security, the Ministry of Public Health, the Ministry of Health. We need to show them that we are not their competitors, but we are complementing the efforts. That's number one. Number two, we need to communicate our research findings in a language that is easily understood by the non-scientific community. Number three, we need to demystify physical activity, because some people think physical activity is only going to the gym, 5-star hotel, and going into the gym and paying money to register. So we have to demystify this by showing them that we only want them to move, be active, reduce the sitting, break the sitting, walk, moving forward. Then the other thing is that we have to write. We have to be visible in the space. If we are not visible, if our voices are not being heard, then we need to collaborate across the African continent, from Lagos to Johannesburg through Nairobi. We have to build a future generation of researchers. Then lastly, I've seen my friend, Professor Monyeki, has talked about food security. You see, Africa is facing a double-edged sword when it comes to food security. At one end of the spectrum, we have people who have so much excess, too much food, especially in the urban areas. On the other extreme hand, we have people who don't have anything to eat. Basically, drought, poverty. We have to handle these two scenarios by addressing, because some things are out of our control. Poverty, drought is an act of God. But we must send out the message. We must send out the message on the need for healthy diet, the need for being active. And then other people will have their role to play to address issues of drought and famine and food insecurity. Thank you, Professor Adewale.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Onywera. So there is a question directly to Professor and Dr. Karekezi, and this is about communication. Somebody in the audience was interested in knowing how can we communicate the message to return to a more traditional, nutrient-rich food, and to the public in general, and also to those already living with type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And maybe just to add on to what Professor Onywera has said, and also to answer this specific question, I did mention that we do work with media, and we work with media at different levels, both national media, the radio, TV. We also work with community media and the local traditional stations. And of course, there's the online bloggers and so on. So that provides us with a good network of people to send out messages. I believe in a format that the people can understand, and especially as we look at research findings and so on, to disseminate these messages to the communities. We also do work with other community leaders. We work with teachers. We work with religious leaders. And these are very well recognized and held in high opinion, the teachers and the religious leaders by most African communities. So these are opinion leaders, and they're able to send these messages out to the communities. One other avenue that we have been using, people that we work with, are persons with lived experience of different non-communicable diseases. For example, people living with diabetes, who come together and form support groups, or what we also call county chapters. These are advocacy groups who are able to disseminate information to their local communities. So these are some of the avenues that we can use in terms of disseminating the need to eat more traditional healthy foods, which are more nutrient rich and so on. And also, in addition to creating awareness of the shortcomings of the foods that are available commercially, like the so-called, I keep calling them Western diets, but they're no longer Western diets. We have adopted them here. The fast foods and so on. One of the other things that the government is doing is in order to try and reduce on the consumption of these unhealthy diets, the sugar-sweetened beverages, which are well known to contribute to the increase in burden of NCDs, looking at developing a nutrient profile model so that they're able to, the nutrient profile model as well as front of pack labeling, to create awareness amongst the citizens of the nutrition value of the foods that are available so that they can make healthy food choices. Again, in terms of the other thing we're also trying to do as a policy measure is to restrict marketing of unhealthy foods and sugar-sweetened beverages to children, and especially in terms of marketing, either on television, and we're also looking forward to them having billboards in restricting advertising in public spaces, especially near schools, and so on, to try and reduce on the influence of industry on children's choices in terms of foods. We're also working with parents to create awareness of the unhealthy foods which are available on the market, and the role of these unhealthy foods in the development of different non-communicable diseases. So we're looking at using different avenues to send these messages across. We also do work with the ministry, as I said, with the Ministry of Health. We're also part of the Interagency Coordinating Committee, which brings on board the non-health sector, as Professor Onywera was saying, the need to look at multi-sectoral action in terms of NCD prevention and control. So this particular body is able to brings on board agriculture, environment, trade and industry, and so on, for them to understand what is their role in NCD prevention and control, and to understand the drivers of NCDs, the alcohol use, tobacco use, unhealthy diets, physical inactivity, environmental pollution, so that they also understand that it is within their docket to control these risk factors for NCDs. Because at the moment, NCDs are a big driver, they're big budget for the government in terms of healthcare. But if we're able to control these risk factors, looking more at prevention rather than not just waiting for people to get the NCDs, we will be able, I believe, to manage the NCD burden. Because at the moment, with the increase in non-communicable diseases, it will be very difficult for African governments to provide treatment and care. So we really need to focus on prevention and focus on adopting healthy lifestyles. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Karekezi. And Dr. Onywera, I saw your hand on, but let me quickly. There is a student in the audience who actually wants to know how he can contribute towards the goal of improving PA in Africa, and also the type of resources that are available for students to leverage on. I will quickly want to say that there are a lot of resources available. One of those is for you to be a member of ISBNPA. If you be a member of ISBNPA, you can join a lot of there are a lot of SIG, special interest group. There are also the NESI, new and early stage investigators group that you can be in that. If you are in that network, you will see a lot of things that is already going on how to improve physical activities and behavioral and nutrition generally, broadly. So that's the resources, and it's free for most students, especially from the LMIC. So you have a lot of resources to leverage on in that regard. Go ahead, Dr. Onywera.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Adewale, for that. So I've seen interest in the holiday program we are running here at KCA University. And people are asked, delegates are asked, how can they do it in Botswana? It's easy, just start. Even if you start with 2 children coming to the field and you join them, and the story will go and go and go. I am willing to, my email address is here, and maybe Antonio can share. I can share the template that we have started here at KCA. We started with 5 children. Now we are going to 200 children, and it is still growing. In fact, I'm overwhelmed by the number of young people who are in the fields here. Lastly, in terms of resources, there are resources available. You need to stay interconnected, as Dr. Adewale has said. Finally, Nairobi, Kenya has hosted this first webinar series. We would like to invite other African continents, other African countries to also be able to host the second, the third, the fourth. We will be there to support you. So thank you so much. And really, this is great. Thank you. Back to you, Adewale.
Yeah, thank you so much. There are still more questions in the Q&A, but for the interest of time, we just have 2 more minutes. And I think we want the president of ISBNPA to have 1 or 2 things to say, or Antonio, either of you can quickly conclude this session so we can allow people to go and do whatever they need to do. Yeah, thank you.
I just would like to say this is great to see such enthusiastic and really skilled people in our field in Africa. I've been inspired by what you said, and I recognize, highlighted the importance of the environment, multi-sectoral action to make something happen, because one single element is not going to change much our lifestyle. It's a matter of engaging the whole society in all the sectors that impact on our behaviors. And that is exactly what you were saying. It's fantastic to hear it from you. But sad also to hear that things aren't going very well at the moment and we need to take action. That's what happens.
And from my side, so first of all, thank you for joining us. We will be following up with you. The video of the presentation will be available, but we have a few questions, and someone asked us what are we doing. A society such as ISBNPA is as good as the membership. So you are free to join us, and with your efforts, we will try to make better things for behavior, nutrition, and physical activity in Africa. So unfortunately, we do not have a lot of financial resources, but we have a lot of people, we have a lot of will, and those 2 things will be potentially very helpful for you to network, especially as Adewale was saying. So please follow up with us. We will be having some more webinars such as this, and that was it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you all. I think we should bring the sessions to an end, and I will encourage all of us, especially those of us that our questions have not been addressed, to reach out directly to Dr. Catherine and Professor Onywera. This way we can continue to build the momentum. You can also reach out to ISBNPA if you have any question that has not been addressed in this session. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good to
Thank
see
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
everyone.
night. Those were,
Bye-bye.
yeah. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Thank you.